Hello everyone, my name is Sean McDevitt and I'm an independent author. All of my books are available at Amazon. Like many of you, I'm a big fan of the Hot Ones Challenge. For one, I love spicy food, and also it's really entertaining to watch those celebrities as their personas slowly change the further they get into the challenge, gradually as the sauces get hotter and hotter. And I thought it would be amusing to do my own sort of hot wings challenge with a twist. What I'm going to do is use my own kit of Hot Ones sauces, which I did order for myself. And as I progressively get through these sauces, I'm going to attempt to read from one of my own books, which is called Shakespeare's Skull, a novel in 5 acts. Now, a little bit of backstory about Shakespeare's Skull. It is a work of fiction, as are all of my books. What it contains is the story of researchers and scientists who take it upon themselves to determine whether or not the bones of William Shakespeare are actually in his grave at Stratford-upon-Avon. Now, a little bit of a spoiler alert. They do find Shakespeare's skull, but I mean, it's called Shakespeare's Skull and they don't find it. They do find the skull. What I'm going to read is from a particular section right before they actually locate the skull. And again, I just want to reinforce that the discovery of the skull really isn't that much of a spoiler. What the story does focus on is how difficult it is for them to locate and then authenticate the skull. And then they also have to deal with some of the real-world ramifications of having found Shakespeare's skull. As I said, I did order my own kit of hot sauces from Hedonist, and I gotta tell you, to be honest, the fumes from some of these bottles as I was prepping this, some of the fumes actually made me cough, so we'll see how this goes. Also, just for full disclosure, what I'm eating are actually plant-based chicken wings. The older I get, the less of a fan I am of the chicken bones. Now, before I start actually reading from my work, I guess it's time to try wing number 1. Not bad.
I hope not.
It's got some zest to it, but it's really not bad. In case you're wondering, that's my producer and wife, Robin, in the background, who's cackling with laughter. With wing number 1 in my mouth and under my belt, I'm going to start reading from Shakespeare's Skull. Feeling warm, but not unpleasant, they stepped forward. With their flashlights, they saw something cavernous. Their lights only went so far, and ultimately their feeble little beams of light died out into a hole of blackness. No walls or ceiling were readily evident. It was unclear how far the floor stretched out in front of them. They turned their flashlights in all directions, with Maria carrying the extra light of a lantern, hoping for a sign of structure but found none. They wound up with their backs to each other, suddenly feeling small and disoriented. Maria, Killian said quietly, trying to stay calm, "I'm sensing a tremendous void in here. It must be enormous, but we still need illumination. I think I need to go back to the fuse box." "Don't leave me here," she protested. "Well, then come back by the door and wait for me. There can't possibly be anyone down here, but I need to get back down to that fuse box." He noted that as they spoke, their voices were echoing heavily. Whatever room they were in, it consisted of hard surfaces that must have stretched out dozens of meters or more. They returned to the landing. "You wait here and leave the door open," he told her. "The fuse box is only a few feet away. I want you to tell me if anything happens when I try something." He took a creaky first step down the stairs, froze, then turned to her. "Maria, if something goes wrong, make sure everyone knows that I did take a moment to question the wisdom of firing up the electricity in a burned-out building." Now we will try wing number 2. This one's a little more slow acting. I'm not really getting too much. It's not bad, but I did expect more of a bite there. Continuing, he headed down the staircase, which protested loudly with every careful step that he took. He made it down to the floor, then turned to the wall where he'd seen the fuse box. He trained his flashlight on it, examining it as he approached. There were 2 black bakelite blocks marked "When fully in, reverse for off," and there were 4 screw-type fuses. Killian hadn't dealt with one of these dating back to when all of his grandparents were living, but as he studied it, certain details started to come back to him. Checking carefully for any signs of damage, he reached out and reversed the hinges on each of the carriages, and then started to screw the fuses back in sequence. As he completed tightening the first fuse, he heard a loud clunk from above, and Maria screamed. Yes, that worked. Keep going." We have something up there?" he stammered. "Yes, there is light. Keep going." He forced himself to concentrate, trying not to rush. As the second fuse tightened, there was another clunk, and Maria squealed yet again. "What's going on up there?" he yelled, agitated. "Just keep going, keep going." He turned back to the box and gave the third fuse a few turns. Clunk. Another loud gasp from Maria. He worked on the 4th and final fuse. Clunk. Another scream from above. David, come here. I do have a tangy aftertaste going here. I was just asked if I have something to drink. I do have water and milk on standby. Boy, I am prepared. Number 3. I believe this one is a sriracha. Well, I'll reach for my water bottle here. That has kind of a tangy orange flavor to it, to me anyway. That's the first sip of water that I've taken, not because it's too hot, but because, well, you know, when you're eating, it's good to stay hydrated. But I'm not what I would call uncomfortable. Now, my wife and producer, Robin, who lives in Wisconsin, breaks out into sweat if she eats ketchup. So I can only imagine what number 3 would be doing to her right about now. As we continue, he bolted for the staircase, but the first noisy step reminded him of the weakening wood he was standing on, and he had to force himself to take each step gingerly. He half ran under the mask, making its scarves wave gently. After taking just a few steps into the room, he stopped cold. "Oh, dear God," he blurted, and the pronounced echo in the room returned to his voice. Without even realizing it, they both pitched their hard hats to the floor. What was revealed above was astonishing. A dazzling display of light thrust onto walls and ceiling far away and above, a breathtaking display of what could only be described as stars. "It's so beautiful, it looks just like the night sky. David, I think we've discovered an underground planetarium," Maria exclaimed, her tone light. David took 2 steps, then felt himself rooted to the floor. A shockwave of realization pummeled him, striking him in the face, resounding through his whole body. Maria, he shouted. "Yes?" And now we pause for wing number 4. So far, they're all very similar to me. They've all got a similar zest and bite. So far, with the exception of number 3, I'm not detecting too much of an increase in heat. Well, here comes a little bit. But again, to me, it's pleasant. It's not obnoxious. I sound like a snooty wine connoisseur, don't I? Continuing, he said, and clearing bits of food from his teeth. And I will admit to feeling a little bit of a nose run here. Nothing serious, just A little. Continuing. Herschel and Somerville were astronomers, right? What? Caroline Herschel and Mary Somerville, they were both astronomers, isn't that correct? He asked urgently. Yes, Maria answered. They were nominated to the Royal Astronomy Academy at the same time. Cameras, he yelled. Maria nervously set down her lantern and dug into her coat for her phone. David, what are you thinking? Tell me. He started taking pictures in all directions. Maria, this is a star chart. It's not just a pretty picture. This is a real night sky. I'm recognizing constellations, see? He took her arm, gently lifting it towards the starry-decked heavens. There, the constellation of Aries. There, the constellation of Leo. Here's what we're going to do. He stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. We need to photograph this as much as possible. If we stand with our backs to each other and make a full circle, we should be... Intake of air there was a little hot. Starting over, shall we? If we stand with our backs to each other and make a full circle, we should be able to get full coverage. Here, stand beside me, make sure the flash is off, and we'll do this slowly. They both held their cell phones aloft, and Killian gently applied some pressure using his hip, encouraging Maria to start turning. The warmth and intimacy of the moment was not lost on them, despite the importance of the task at hand. Killian drew a deep breath and began reciting some words that he thought would be appropriate. With that, we now go to wing number 5. And by the way, this completes the first plate of wings for me. As I said before, you noticed that when I took an intake of air, there was a distinct burning sensation in the back of my mouth that made it difficult to speak. We'll finish number 5 here. I do think a sip of water is warranted.
Is your nose running?
A little bit, yeah. My nose is running just a touch, but I'm not uncomfortable. See, the thing is, I enjoy spicy food. So back to our story, where Killian is about to recite some Shakespeare. Last night of all, when yon same star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illume that part of heaven where it now burns, his words echoed into the void as they continued their strange dance, slowly turning and clicking away. He wondered if she'd been paying attention to what he said, but she surprised him. Doubt that the stars are fire, she replied quietly and deliberately. Doubt that the sun doth move. Doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. Their circle had ended, and Killian faced to turn her. Face to turn her? Let's try that again, shall we? Their circle had ended, and Killian faced... Their circle had ended, and Killian turned to face her, his heart pounding. Maria, he asked, his voice quavering. Maria, what are you trying to say to me? Her large dark eyes gazed up at him, all at once gentle, serious, and inviting. He reached up with his hand to caress the side of her cheek. As he did so, he saw in her eyes a particular pinpoint of light, in a shape he didn't recognize. To her confusion, he stopped, looked straight up, and then turned around. Maria, I'm sorry. I see a light. Where is it coming from? He said almost frantically, his head turning back and forth rapidly. Maria was certainly disappointed, but most of all confused as to what he was saying. David, what do you mean? She asked, in a tone both a little hurt but also greatly puzzled. There we go, the first burp. As we approach number 6. This is the second plate of wings. We'll see how it goes. This one has a little more zest to it. There's definitely an increase, if you know what I'm saying, in the temperature. At this point, I think I might have some milk. Like I said, I did come prepared. There's something about the milk that is supposed to settle the tongue and gums a little bit. Okay, that did help. My lips are tingling. Interesting. Back to the book. The light in here, where is it coming from? I set those fuses below, and apparently something came on, but I don't know from where, and he turned back to her, desperate. Maria, I saw something reflected in your eyes, a point of light I hadn't noticed before, and I... You mean up there? She gasped, forgetting the interrupted kiss, and pointed up at a spot he hadn't noticed until now. He rushed over to her and turned around, straining to see things from her view. There it was, perhaps 6 meters or so off the floor, a fixed point of concentrated light. He took a few steps forward and then realized as he did so, something directly under that point of light was casting a shadow on the stars above. Pardon me. He broke into a half run, making it only about 20 meters when he realized he was about to crash headlong into some sort of dark concrete pillar. He reached out for it, taking its grooved edges into his hands. Maria, are you seeing this? Something is at the top of this column. Have your eyes adjusted enough? From here you can see it's plainly obvious. There are 4 separate beams of light concentrated on the top of this column. Whatever is up there is what's creating the star effect. My God, I can see it, Maria cried out. As the angles became obvious, what had seemed a cavernous space suddenly felt quite smaller, and Killian excitedly was able to point out the source of each beam of light. I'm intrigued by this one because this sauce has a darker color than any of the other sauces to this point. Much more brown. And again, there is an increase definitely in the Scoville units. Okay, that one's borderline uncomfortable. I really feel it at the back of the throat. Might actually have to gargle some of this. Boy, oh boy. Whew, 3 to go. It's hard to concentrate. Whew. Yeah, now the next one is the one I'm dreading. It's called Da Bomb, and that one's I've been told to look out for. Excuse me while I have some water. Oh boy. Whew.
This is just torture. I mean, you can't torture yourself.
It's fun. And as you notice, scientifically, it is inhibiting my ability to speak and read my own book. Rob, is it just me, or is my face actually getting redder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can sort of see it in my forehead and my cheeks. Whew. Ah! My tongue feels very alive, very aware. Not bad. It's more the back of the throat where it's actually kind of uncomfortable at this point. Whew. No, what's funny is that, okay, a little sheen of sweat is starting, a little bit, and I just realized when I made that sharp intake of air, that's a mistake. That at this point, that hurts. Whose idea was this again? Whew. It seems like once I get going, once I start reading, I'm fine, but taking these little breaks between is... Whew. There are 4 separate sources of light. They must be ellipsoidal lights. That's what they are, he explained, the words tumbling out of him. They're almost like theatrical lights, and they're all focused on the top of this great column, or whatever it is, he said, gesturing at the dark pillar that loomed over him. But I can't quite make out what's up on top there. There's too much of a glare. I can't tell if it's a sphere or a globe or something else. Something round and translucent? Maria pondered, running her hand through her hair. Yes, or something small and not totally solid with little cracks and holes in it. His words, simple, plain, unassuming, hung in the air as they echoed around the chamber. They both stood staring at the pillar, an indistinct orb of some sort resting at the very top, providing the room with a simulated canopy of stars. The smile of wonder that had been on Killian's face slowly started to melt away as an unthinkable possibility started boring its way into his mind. His head turned downward and his eyes started darting about the darkened floor, and he could feel his blood pressure starting to rise. So can I, for a completely different reason. Maria noticed his transformation but could not decipher it. He raised a hand to his mouth for a moment, then forced himself to speak. "Maria," he said flatly. "Yes, David," she replied, lost in her own thoughts, which were just as confused, but that had no certain destination. "Maria, I'm going to head down the stairs for a moment, and I'm going to release just a few of the fuses. There's something I want to see." Although Maria quickly figured out what Killian meant, he did not wait for an answer. He fairly bolted out of the chamber, dashing down the rickety old untrustworthy stairs, safety be damned. "David, David, don't you dare leave me up here," she shouted, half joking and exhilarated. "It's bad enough that you suspended a kiss just so you could go play with a fuse box." He headed straight for the fuse box and hurriedly unscrewed one fuse and then another, hearing the same clunk from above as before. He rushed up the stairs again, not caring a whit if they might actually withstand his weight or not, and ran back into the chamber. Half of the star field had vanished. There were now only 2 lights directed at the top of the pillar, and the glare that had been there previously was now greatly diminished. He walked up to Maria and placed a hand on each of her shoulders. "Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wander over to that side of the chamber," he said, pointing. "I'm taking my camera phone with me. I'm going to focus in tightly to the top of the pillar, and I want to see what is on top of it. But I want to say something to you." Okay, and now we go for the gusto. As I'm told, that was the bomb, and here it comes. This is the one that I've seen people freeze on hot ones, actually freeze up. And to be honest, it is not hard to see why. My mouth is stinging right now. I have heard some celebrities say, okay, that's just wrong. Oh boy, they're not kidding. Ugh. You could use this for chemical warfare. Oh my gosh. I think my teeth are melting. Now I'm left doing the one thing I didn't want to do on camera, but I have no choice. Ugh. Yeah, Nagata Vita. How much farther do I have to go? The milk definitely does tap it down. But honestly, folks, the bomb, it feels like a brush fire in my mouth. Resuming. If this is what I think it is, it's going to go down in history as one of the all-time great discoveries. Her eyes widened as he spoke. Donald Cardiff left us a very vague trail of clues, and so far there have been no true dead ends. Again, if this is what I think it is, David, if you're saying that's really shh, don't jinx it, he interrupted, placing a finger gently on her lips. Just let me say this. As much as I wish Philip and Ebony and especially Ursula could be with us right now, I cannot think of another person that I would want to share this moment with. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. He held her tightly, and her breath started coming in deep, almost sobbing jabs as the realization of what he was saying sank in. Speaking of sinking in, number 9. If I'm not mistaken, this may have been the one where Conan O'Brien was putting on a brave face, but in reality, he almost started speaking in tongues. I may have just bitten the inside of my mouth, which will really make this interesting. Whose harebrained idea was this again? Remind me why I did this. Getting back to the book. Oh boy. Oh. Eyes watering. David, I love you so much, she whispered. He planted a firm, warm kiss by her ear before letting her go. He straightened himself before proceeding and took on a professional tone. Doctor, I have a job I need to do. And speaking of jobs I gotta do, the last one, number 10. I'm being told I didn't take much of a break, but I like living on the edge. What can I say? This final one for me has almost a metallic strength to it. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm really feeling this on the tongue and the roof of my mouth. Oh boy. One paragraph. Can he make it, folks? Can he do it? Can he make it? Oh, my head hurts. What you're seeing, folks, is in fact real. Oh, God. Milk. My lips are stinging. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Wawa. Without further ado, without any more milk or water, I'm going to attempt to read this honestly as best I can. With that, he started walking across the room. He mentally counted about 40 steps before turning. He pulled out his phone and immediately switched the main screen over to the camera. He held it up, focusing it on the top of the pillar, which didn't prove difficult with less light. He started gently pinching and swiping the screen, trying to get the camera to focus on the half-lit gray globule up in the air, so tantalizingly out of reach. The camera struggled to compensate for the lighting and then finally focused. Killian started breathing deeply and slowly. There, atop a pillar in a long-forgotten room in the bowels of a burned-out church, sat the unmistakable visage of 2 empty eye sockets staring back at him. I made it, my friends, but at what cost? I think my bathroom door is gonna need crime scene tape. Ugh. Whew. Like I said, it seemed enjoyable up until about 6, 7, and 8. Oh, forget it. And I've got plenty of water on hand to sort of tamper it down, but oh boy, folks. It is not hype, believe me. Okay, well, I hope you've made it to the end of this saga with my stinging eyes and my burning mouth. But it was a lot of fun. I hope you had a few laughs. And again, all of my work is available at Amazon. Please buy all of my books on Kindle, some in paperback, some on hardcover. Help me pay for the medical bills when I need to have my stomach pumped.